This is True News, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help us God. If any historians survive World War III's nuclear nightmare, surely they will write about the veil of blindness that covered the eyes of Western leaders prior to the start of a horrific exchange of weapons of mass destruction between Russia and NATO allies. High-level Russian leaders have repeatedly warned America and Europe that their continued involvement in the Ukraine war will inevitably lead to a nuclear war. Nevertheless, American and European politicians and the war lobby continue to ignore the warnings and push ahead with their insane policy of arming Nazi-controlled Ukraine. We will start today with comments made by Congressman Michael McCaul, chairman of the U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee, saying that the USA and the EU should supply Ukraine with tanks and long-range missiles. He made the comments on Sunday during an interview with ABC News. So, Doc, I saw this Sunday evening, and, I'm just sitting in my home, just shaking my head, saying, I can't believe what we're witnessing. There's not one statesman in Washington.
Nobody
That's saying, everybody calm down. This is getting out of control. If we continue down this path, we're going to have a nuclear war. Hundreds of millions, maybe 1 billion people will die. Not one person. And
on the left or the right.
That's right. Absolutely correct. Doc, several months ago, for what it was worth, I sent an email to both of Florida's U.S. senators, Rick Scott and Marco Rubio.
Right.
And I expressed I was a polite email that said, look, I don't want a nuclear war. My family, we're having discussions in our home about how do we survive a nuclear war? And I said, I told both senators, I said, I resent the stress, the anxiety that you are placing on my family and other families because of this policy of arming Ukraine, which is leading to war. Senator Rubio's office, these are all, written by aides.
Sure.
I got back a polite response that said,
thanks for writing.
Thanks for writing, but we're standing with Ukraine. No, that wasn't the case with Senator Scott. Whoever wrote his reply was foaming at the mouth, had rabies.
I remember you telling me this.
That email was literally dripping with blood. It was, Putin has to be destroyed. Putin is a murderer. Putin is a madman. The United States of America must stop Putin. There was nothing in that email that said, dear Florida constituent, voter for Senator Scott, we hear you. We assure you Senator Scott does not want a nuclear war. Nothing. It was the email reply literally was just reeking with hatred of Russia. It frightened me when I read the email that this came from the office of a United States Senator. And I knew the war fever is running high in Washington.
And no one exemplifies that more than Representative McCaul. He has been full throttle on support for Ukraine and for arming Ukraine. They're looking in every closet in D.C. for weapons or for tanks to be able to send. If they're not finding Biden documents, they're looking for weapons and everything else that they can send and ship off.
McCaul's always been a puppet of the deep state. He's a mouthpiece for the war lobby. And now he's chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee.
That's right.
So we're going to play just one video clip from the interview with ABC News. He talks about the U.S. needs to give tanks. He says, look, the U.S. just needs to give one tank.
One Abrams tank.
Just one. And the reason he said one, he said, what he's saying is, that's all it will take for the rest of the European Union to release their stockpile. If they see Biden put just one tank in Ukraine, then the European Union will know, we just got the green light from Washington. Send the tanks to Ukraine. And the argument is that the U.S. has more tanks in Europe in the hands of the Europeans than we have here. So it would be a lot easier for the Europeans to give American tanks to Ukraine than for the United States to ship
Right.
tanks from the United States. So he's saying, look, Biden just needs to send one tank. But that's not where he stopped. He goes on to say, Biden needs to give Ukraine long-range missiles that can hit Crimea. I mean, this is, Doc, we know what's going to happen when U.S. missiles hit Crimea. Russian missiles are going to hit Washington.
Yep, because Russia considers Crimea Russian territory.
Not only Russian territory, but sacred territory.
That's right, the birthplace not only of Russia, but the birthplace of Christianity in Russia. It's
right.
their holy land.
It is their Jerusalem, and they are not going to give it up. It's sacred to them. Let's watch Congressman McCaul beating the war drums on ABC News.
Now let's bring in the new chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Congressman Michael McCaul. Good to see you this morning,
Thanks,
Mr.
Martha.
Chairman. You heard what Senator Kuhn said about the Abrams. You have urged Germany to allow those Leopard 2 tanks to be released into Ukraine. But what about Abrams tanks, the U.S. tanks? Do you believe those should be sent, as President Zelensky said he so desperately needs?
Well, you know, I do. The Wall Street Journal had an editorial that said we're giving them just enough to bleed through months without a chance of victory. That's the problem here. They need the tanks and they need the tactical long-range artillery known as ATACMS. If we announced we were going to give Abrams tanks, just one, that would give Germany what I hear is that Germany's waiting for us to take the lead. Then they would put Leopard tanks in and also remember, there are about 10 countries that have Leopard tanks, but they need Germany to sign off on releasing.
So just one Abrams tank, you think, would release all the Leopard 2s?
Or even saying that we're going to put Abrams tanks in, I think would be enough for Germany to unleash.
The Pentagon says they're too cumbersome, complicated, expensive. They only get 3 miles per gallon. Are they the right tanks to be there?
Every military expert I've said, including General Keane and others, these tanks, remember, you have a new general in town now, right? He took the butcher of Syria out. He's got the more offensive general. There's going to be a winter offensive by the Russians. They need these tanks on the eastern flank and the Donbass. They also need the ATACMS, the longer-range artillery, to hit Crimea, where the Iranian drones are, and that's where likely.
And you believe they should hit Crimea. Has the U.S. softened its position on that? Because that always seemed like a red line, that would provoke Vladimir Putin.
That's the assumption that Crimea is part of Russia. It was illegally invaded upon in violation of international law. I don't consider.
I don't think they're assuming
it's
part of Russia, but they just, in the past, have not wanted to go that far.
If a King's X is placed in Crimea, you can't hit the Iranian drones. That's what's causing all the power outages, the innocent civilians being killed, of these Iranian drones in Crimea, in addition to other missiles. But this is what the Ukrainians say. It's what our top advisors I talk to say is what they need. When we give them what they need, Martha, Stingers, when we give them javelins, when we give them HIMARS, then the longer range artillery, they win. But if it's going to be a slow bleed without a chance of victory, that violates the Colin Powell Doctrine.
How do you think Putin would react if our weapons hit Crimea?
How is he reacting when we put the HIMARS in? How is he reacting?
So you don't think this would make any difference?
I don't think so at all.
Okay.
And who's being provocative here? I'd say Mr. Putin is.
Since the war began, NATO has really stayed together, but we've seen a little bit of distraction in the last few weeks.
Doug, did it appear to you that the host, Martha Raddatz, that she had her face seemed to be strained, stressed by his answers, that she was like looking at him going,
Are you kidding me?
Are you serious? You want us to give the Ukrainians missiles that will hit Ukraine? Are you serious? I mean, that was the look on her face. She was kind of like looking down, kind of staring at him.
Well, her body language, she was leaning away from him. You know, it's like taken aback. And so that's the read I got on it. I agree with you.
So even some of the mouthpieces of the news media
are having a hard time swallowing.
Are starting to get cold feet about how far this is going, because she knows what Putin's going to do, and she said, well, that's a red line, and Mr. McCaul said, so
we've crossed other red lines, and so
nothing's happened.
Right.
Next one. This is a tweet, photograph sent out by Lindsey Graham, another warmonger from South Carolina. He tweeted, all three of us, one Republican and two Democrats, share the same goal for Ukraine to drive the Russians out of Ukraine. To achieve that goal, the Ukrainian military needs tanks.
Lots of tanks. And so let's keep that image up for just a moment. Lindsey Graham, Richard Blumenthal, and Sheldon Whitehouse visited Kiev this past Friday. And after meeting with the Ukrainian president, Lindsey Graham urged the West to send tanks. So a sitting U.S. senator there, and of course Richard Blumenthal as well, he said Putin is trying to rewrite the map of Europe by force of arms, Graham said. Well, I think NATO's done a pretty good job of that already, rewriting the map of Europe. And so,
Lindsey Graham was one of the first, last year to call for the assassination of Putin.
Yes, of a head of state, the murder of a head of state.
Yeah.
Business Insider had this story with Lindsey Graham. Rick, he's really getting fed up with this. He had some choice words. He's tired of this S show, and that the U.S. and Germany should send tanks to Ukraine. The world order is at stake, Rick.
Okay, that's what stood out to me, Doc, when I saw this article yesterday. The world order is at stake. Whose world order?
The current world order.
The one that he works for.
Yes. The Western world order is at stake.
And he's telling the truth. Their world order is at stake. It's crumbling. It's falling apart. And that's why they're pushing for a war. Because they're desperately trying to cling to power in the world. The post-World War II Western New World Order is dying. And a new world order is starting to rise up. And the globalists, whatever you want to call them, there's an assortment of names.
Right.
We're all talking about the same people, whether it's the Trilateral Commission, the CFR, the globalists, Bilderberg,
Committee of 300.
Committee 300, Masons, whatever you want to call them.
They're the same character wearing different hats.
Yes. The white men that run the Western world.
You got it.
And they're white men. They're white men that run the Western world, and they like war. They like money, they like war, and they like little kids. That's the truth. They like death. They run a death cult. They worship at the altar of death. And they want more death. And so when he says, our world order is at stake, he's telling the truth. Lindsey Graham is absolutely telling the truth.
The world order we like right now.
Well, I hate his world order. I despise his world order. And those of you, see, some of you who are watching us, you're really schizophrenic, just some of you. Because some of you absolutely know about what you call the New World Order. And you oppose them and you hate them and everything, and yet you're supporting Zelensky in Ukraine, and you want Russia crushed. That's schizophrenic. The people who are propping up Ukraine are the same New World Order freaks that you despise.
Yes.
Who tried to get a genetic therapy injected into your body, who forced you to wear a mask and made you go into lockdowns and wanted to put you in COVID concentration camps. It's the same group. It's the Russians who are fighting them. Now, if the Russians win, will their world order be any better than what we don't know, do we?
We don't know.
And knowing mankind,
Well, knowing the nature of mankind.
knowing the nature of mankind, it will eventually become evil. So there are two world orders fighting right now. And this is a clash. The old New World Order is dying. And I don't think it's just one new world order. I think there are going to be multiple new world orders. The one to watch out for is China. Right. China would like to absorb Russia. I mean, they share a border with Russia. They're using Russia right now. But China is the winner in all this. Between the United States and Europe and Russia, China is the winner. And China wants to play this game so that Europe and the West and Russia are, mangled in this war, and China comes out unscathed.
Because because they know at some point in the future there's going to be a direct conflict between China and basically the West.
Yes.
So.
But if China loses half of their population, they still have about 600 million people left, which is double what we have right now in this country, almost. So China doesn't care about losing half of its population. They still will survive as a country. This is a dangerous game that's being played right now, and what's at stake are the lives of about 7 billion people on the planet. And if this war goes all the way to weapons of mass destruction, life will never, ever be the same. Never. You can't, the survivors will not be able to isolate the effects of a nuclear war. The whole world will suffer.
Yes.
There will be vast parts of continents that will be uninhabitable for 1,000 years. Food supply will dry up. Weather patterns will change. Riots,
Mass
revolutions.
migrations, yes.
Just mass migrations. I mean, the whole world will be chaos. You have no idea the nightmare that's going to be on this planet if Lindsey Graham gets his way. Somebody needs to stop these people. I mean, where are the leaders for peace in the world? Why are we letting these people drive us to war?
I mean, even the Pope won't even speak out for peace. I mean, there used to be even some voices of peace out there, but where are the peaceniks here in the United States that are against war? Nobody's against war here in America.
No, Joan Baez is still around. I guess she's, about 95 years old now? She needs to get her guitar and come out and start singing again.
Would she be singing for Ukraine?
Well, she probably would, and that's how bizarre things are right now. Well, we want to show you some more, just to drive this point home. This next one is a Telegram message that was posted over the weekend by the Speaker of the Russian Duma.
Right.
And Mr. Volodin.
Vyacheslav Volodin, yes.
So this is like the Speaker of the House in the United States of America, Speaker of the Duma, high-ranking, powerful Russian politician. But we're going to read what he posted on Telegram on Saturday.
So deliveries of offensive weapons to the Kiev regime will lead to a global catastrophe. If Washington and NATO countries supply weapons that will be used to strike civilian cities and attempt to seize our territories as they threaten, this will lead to retaliatory measures using more powerful weapons. So members of the Congress, deputies of the Bundestag, the National Assembly of France, and other European parliaments must realize their responsibility to humanity. With their decisions, Washington and Brussels are leading the world to a terrible war, to a completely different military action than today. when strikes are carried out exclusively on the military and critical infrastructure used by the Kiev regime. So given the technological superiority of Russian weapons, foreign politicians making such decisions need to understand that this could end in a global tragedy that will destroy their countries. Arguments that the nuclear powers have not previously used weapons of mass destruction in local conflicts are untenable, because these states did not face a situation where there was a threat to the security of their citizens and the territorial integrity of their country. So he's making the continued Russian argument that this is a fight for their lives, for their national sovereignty. So let's flip the script, okay? If the United States felt that their existence as a nation was threatened, that at any time the enemies of the world could take them out, would the U.S. respond with weapons of mass destruction? You cotton picking right, they would. They would not hesitate for a moment if they thought that the future of the United States, of America, hung on action by an enemy.
Doc, if you backed up a grizzly bear into a corner and repeatedly wounded him, not fatal wounds, but injuries. You repeatedly wounded the grizzly bear, and you kept coming at him and coming at him, and you're striking at his cubs, and you're just getting closer and closer, and that grizzly bear has nowhere to go. Would at some point that grizzly bear charge you and rip your head off?
Absolutely, because it would be responding to what it perceives as a threat of its existence at that point.
That's what the Russian bear is going to do.
Now, you may not believe it, and we may not agree with it, but the fact of the matter is they do.
They do. And they feel paranoid, they feel threatened, they feel surrounded, and they believe the entire Western world is gunning for them, which is the truth. We don't have anybody in leadership saying, the Russians are mistaken. We have no desire to destroy Russia. We have no desire. We want to work out a peaceful... There's nobody saying it. They're talking about crushing Russia.
Right. Every talking head you see on TV, no one is saying, you know what, let's sit down with the Russians and, hash this out. I mean, surely there's some sort of agreement that we can come to. No, they've decided we're going to crush Putin and we're going to subdue Russia. Russia is going to become part of the club or else. And Russia knows that too. Plus there's the added level that the Russians, from a theological standpoint, believe that they're on a mission from God.
That's right. So
you may not agree with it, but they believe it.
If we, I'm talking about this ministry, if we organized a rally for peace to stand against the war, would we get a crowd?
A crowd? Mm-hmm. How do you define a crowd? Is it 3 or more people? Because I don't know who would show up, Rick.
Well, could you get 10,000 people?
No, I don't think so.
10,000 people wouldn't come to a rally to make a statement, we don't want nuclear war with Russia.
I really don't think so. I'd like to be proven wrong. I really would.
Well, I think you're right. But I've been pondering all weekend, what do we do to express our opposition to nuclear war? What do we do? I've done everything I can. I say this to the Lord. Lord, I've done everything I can possibly do with the resources you've given me. I've done everything I can do to stop this war. And nothing's working. It's just, we're like on a crazy train that's going faster and faster. And the engineer and the conductor, they're like drunk and on drugs, and they're like, insane people, and you're on this train, and the train is rocking back and forth, and you're like, this is going to go off the tracks at any moment.
Right, and the American people are so hypnotized and mesmerized from all the way starting back at the Vietnam War till today that war isn't real. War is something you see on a TV screen or on a video screen or on your phone.
And it's all
if
American.
You see it at all.
And it's all American.
Right. It's the war reality show. No one's impacted by it. No one, we don't suffer for it. We just shoot bombs everywhere else.
And the mentality is, we have a right to do it because we're Americans.
Right. We're good. We're chosen by God.
If we want to blow up somebody, we can do it. America has the right to blow up any country it wants to blow up.
Because we're right and the rest of you are wrong. That's our attitude, because we're the chosen people.
It's pride. It's pride. And pride comes before a fall. And right now, America is drunk on pride. Arrogance and pride and sin. The country has become wicked, and the leaders are proud and boastful and arrogant, and they're leading the American people to destruction. And most of the people don't even care. They don't even care.
I would say most are not even aware first, and those that are aware don't care.
Right.
So
I think you're right. You're right. Most of the public doesn't even know. Just think about how many of your friends, your relatives, your coworkers, have any idea what you hear on this program. If they're watching, I mean, only a small percentage of the people even watch the news networks. When you look at the ratings, I mean, it's only a couple million people.
That's true.
I mean, Fox News averages, 3 million people watching it? 3 million. We're 350 million people. Okay, CNN gets down to less than 1 million. So you may have 10 million people paying attention to the news, and what they're watching and reading is propaganda. So they don't know what's going on. They're just getting propaganda. The rest of the country is tuned out, completely tuned out to it. A lot of them, they're just working, they're trying to pay their bills just to get by. Others are, they're just deeply involved in the world itself. They don't care about anything. And yet the country is being pushed by this mysterious force. We're going right towards a cliff. It's like a herd of livestock just being driven to a cliff.
Right.
And they're laughing as they go. That's what I see. I see livestock laughing as they race towards the cliff, unaware that they're going to go over to their demise. But Mr. Volodin, he told us on Saturday, Western leaders, you keep delivering weapons to Ukraine, it will lead to a global catastrophe. What is a global catastrophe?
Something happens that changes what happens in the world, a weapon of mass destruction. And he's not limiting it to missiles or arms. He's addressing the nuclear powers in that last quote. So we're assuming that if you're talking to the nuclear powers, the nuclear weapons would be used in the future. And they would say, well, nuclear weapons have never been used before. Well, we've used them. We used them to stop wars in the past. We used it to stop the war with Japan, and we felt justified in doing it.
Yes. But he said in this one, they haven't been used, since World War II, because in wars since World War II, those countries did not feel like that their survival was at stake.
Right.
But this is a different situation. The West has made its purpose to eliminate Russia as a nation. And he said, what he's saying here is that we don't have a choice. We're going to have to use our arsenal. And their arsenal is more than just nuclear weapons, chemical weapons, biological weapons, space-based weapons, scalar weapons, the Poseidon torpedo, which
the tidal missile, the tidal
wave missile, a radiological tidal wave, a wave that would go over the Appalachian Mountains on the East Coast, over the Alleghenies, over the Adirondacks, and radiological water flowing into the Ohio Valley from the Atlantic Ocean. Do you comprehend what we're talking about?
a global catastrophe.
Yes.
See, America hasn't been touched by war for a very, very long time. War has never been on our shores. War has never been on our soil. We're untouchable, Rick. Don't you know? God has protected us and we're untouchable. Well, there's going to come a day where God's hand's going to be lifted and suddenly all hell will break loose on earth because there's going to be a group of people that say, you know, we're just sick and tired of this. Mm-hmm. And they're going to say, if we want to continue to exist as a nation, speaking specifically about Russia, we have to take out the enemy that is seeking to destroy us.
That's where we're at right now.
If someone was coming for you and your family, and you're at your home, and you see them coming, and they're coming down the driveway, they've got a gun, and they're coming down your driveway.
And you're yelling at them.
You better back off.
Yes.
There's a red line. It's my property line. You better back off. Would you be justified in defending yourself and your family?
Yes, because what the Russians have done is that they have repeatedly told Europe and the United States, we're going to use our weapons of mass destruction to defend ourselves.
Yes.
They have repeatedly told us. This has been going on now since last February. This war is almost 1 year old now. And they have repeatedly told us that they're going to use weapons of mass destruction. So in the minds of the Russian leaders, their conscience is cleared because they repeatedly warned us, don't come any further. I'm going to shoot. Back off. Get away. I'm going to protect my family.
Right.
And if the intruder keeps coming, you fire your weapon. And if the intruder dies, your conscience doesn't bother you because you repeatedly told him to stop. This is what the Russians have told the Americans in the European Union. Stop. Back off. Get away from us. We're going to shoot. And they have told us in the past, last year, they will hit the centers of decision-making.
Right. Plural, and didn't limit it to Ukraine.
Yes. So it was not Kiev, it was Berlin, London, Paris, Brussels, Washington. Those are the cities that will be hit. And it will happen so fast. Literally within minutes, all those great cities will disappear. In minutes, Doc. Well, you might say, well, the West will respond and wipe out Russia. Yeah, Russia knows that. They're preparing their people to die. They're preparing their people. They're saying, we're facing Antichrist.
And if we die, we die. We go to heaven.
Yes.
That's
but they're
their
wicked.
attitude.
They're saying America's wicked. That's Antichrist. We're doing our best to stand for God. And Antichrist is coming against us. For those of you, Bible prophecies, what if it turns out in the fulfillment of Bible prophecy that America in the West is the seat of the Antichrist system? What if? What if we're the evil ones in the last days? We're the ones doing the work of Satan.
Well, look at our character traits.
Well, that's what I'm saying, Doc. Look at what we're doing right now.
We kill babies in the womb. We have pedophile drag queens in churches performing. We endorse homosexual marriage. We do all the things that a heathen nation would do.
That's right. And we threaten other nations that if they don't do the same
heathen
we'll destroy
things.
them. We'll destroy them.
And you got to fly their flag too.
Right.
Well, plant your flag there.
So is America and the West, are we the beast system? Are we the system that the Antichrist rules? Will the Antichrist rule over the West? What do you do with your eschatology if one day you wake up and realize the Antichrist is ruling over Washington? What are you going to do about it? Because it sure looks like that's the way it's going. And the beast system will be destroyed. But there will be great destruction before it happens, Doc. Tremendous destruction before it happens. So we get we confuse Babylon and the beast system.
Yes.
Babylon and the beast system are not the same. Babylon gets taken out. The beast system is the worldwide system. I'm convinced Jerusalem is Babylon because the Bible tells us it's the city where they killed our Lord. But the beast is something else. All I'm trying to get Christians to think about is, are we living inside the beast? If we are, you better be very careful about who you're cheering for.
Come out of her, my people.
Yes. Come out of her, my people. I want to show you what Sergei Lavrov said. This is from TASS News Agency. Lavrov says that the war between the West and Russia is no longer a hybrid, but it's almost real.
So we're seeing a shift in the tone of the conflict, the tone of World War III. We've been in World War III for a year now, folks. What's happening in Ukraine is no longer a hybrid, but a real war between the West and Russia, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov believes. He's quoted, "When we talk about what is happening in Ukraine, we are talking about the fact that this is no longer a hybrid war, but a real one, which the West has been preparing for a long time against Russia, trying to destroy everything Russia, from language to culture, which has been in Ukraine for centuries, and forbidding people to speak their native language." He said this at a press conference on Monday following talks with South African Foreign Minister Naledi Pandor. Now, in Ukraine, this is all in the order of things. But the former president of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko, and the current Vladimir Zelensky, who are elected under the slogan of establishing peace, immediately after being elected, turned into war presidents and Russophobe presidents, Lavrov said. Now, Mr. Lavrov, the head of the Russian Foreign Ministry, recalled that Ukraine has adopted laws that prohibit education in Russian, media in Russian, including Ukrainian, laws that even, in fact, prohibit the use of the Russian language in everyday life. Any cultural contacts related to the Russian language are prohibited, and all this is supported by the West. It goes on to say in that article, just like the West supports the regular marches of neo-Nazis with swastikas, with the symbols of the divisions, which were banned by the Nuremberg Tribunal, recognized as criminal, the West supports all this, Lavrov pointed out. And so we're continuing on in the tone of Mr. Lavrov in making it very clear that we're moving from one phase of this war to another. You've been okay with a hybrid war up till now. All right, you ready for a real war? Are you really? Because a real war is going to have pain and suffering and destruction, and it's not going to be limited to just Ukraine.
That's right. Zelensky has stripped away the freedom of press in Ukraine.
Yes.
He's shut down newspapers, television stations.
He has shut down churches in Ukraine.
He has shut down churches. He's taken over the Orthodox Church. I saw a video last week, Doc, of an Orthodox church in Ukraine. The Orthodox Church was under Russia because of the Russian Orthodox Church, and so the Ukraine church was under the Russian Orthodox Church. And I saw a video, Doc, whatever was going on in that church service, it looked like something from Bethel Church on the night that they all smoked crack. I mean, it was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen going on in an Orthodox church.
I believe I've seen the same video where they were dancing at around the altar and and around the elements of communion.
Yes, it was blasphemous. This is what Zelensky has done. First thing Zelensky did when he became president, after the revolution, first thing he did was that he authorized a homosexual pride parade in Kiev. There had never been one. Zelensky ordered that there be a pride parade in Kiev when he became president. Everything he has done has been antichrist. And yet you got these stupid, silly, gullible evangelicals in this country cheering for him and saying, give him more weapons to kill the Russians.
I'm surprised you haven't started to see Vladimir Zelensky showing up on video screens in churches yet. He's been everywhere else. He's been at the Oscars.
Oh, don't give the idea out, Doc.
Oh, okay.
Don't give out the idea.
You didn't hear that from me, okay? So.
Yeah, I wouldn't rule that out. So next one, this is another one from Medvedev. This is today. Medvedev said Ukraine military response, the Ukraine military operation is a response to U.S. actions. That's what he's saying.
So Russian Security Council Deputy Chairman Dmitry Medvedev underscored on Monday that the military operation in Ukraine came as a forced response to the preparation of aggression by the U.S. and its allies. It is obvious to the world that the world is really close to the threat of World War III because of what was happening.
Just look at this.
Yes.
Look at what he's saying.
Former president of Russia. Medvedev stressed at the meeting of the Bureau of the Supreme Party Council.
It's obvious that the world is really close to World War III.
And it goes on to say, the task of our diplomacy is to prevent the cynical line of the Western countries, the Security Council Deputy Chief stated, adding that Moscow's trustworthy partners are countries with significant global economic and political power. In other words, they've got friends too. So now this is from Russia Today, ex-Russian president predicting a new anti-U.S. military alliance. And it's only because of the actions of the U.S. and the West that will be causing this. The Ukraine crisis may lead to the founding of a bloc of countries fed up with Washington. He spoke about this on Telegram as well. He said the meeting in Ramstein and the allocation of heavy weapons to Kiev leave no doubt that our enemies will indefinitely try to wear us down or better, destroy us. And they have enough weapons. If necessary, they will start producing new ones. Therefore, there is no need for illusions. What are the conclusions from this? First, it will be very difficult. Secondly, in the event of a protracted conflict, at some point, a new military alliance will form from those countries that the Americans and their pack of castrated dogs got. This has always happened in the history of mankind during long wars, and then the states will finally throw old Europe and the remnants of the unfortunate Ukrainians, and the world will come to a state of equilibrium. So one way or another, whether this conflict in Ukraine comes to a diplomatic end or it goes into a full-scale throwing nukes at each other war, the world is about to change in a very, very big way in a very short time.
Doc, did you see what Mr. Borrell, was he the president of the European, no, is Borrell the European Union president? I lose track of who these guys, or is he the foreign affairs minister? I think this was on Friday. He said that, telling the audience, need to remind you that the Russians defeated Napoleon and they defeated Hitler. And we need to keep this in mind. Like, are you serious?
Well, they've only existed as a country for 1,200 years. I mean, they probably know what they're doing.
Yes, so, okay, so Doc, okay, so 2 out of 3. 2 out of 3 they won.
In the past 100 years, yes.
All right, they beat Napoleon and they beat Hitler. And Borrell is saying, hey, we here at the European Union, NATO, we got to keep this in mind. Doc, he identified himself and Europe and the West as the enemies of Russia. He identified himself, think about this,
I see what
in
you're
the
saying.
overall, in the big picture of over centuries. What he was saying is, we represent the continuing struggle to conquer Russia. Now, let's not forget, they beat us with Napoleon, and they beat us when we had Hitler. We got to be smarter this time. That's what he's saying. They brought up 2 major European political leaders who tried to conquer Russia, and they were crushed. And but both of them, I mean, Hitler extracted tremendous pain and bloodshed from the Russian people. That's why they'll never, ever let the Nazis get off the ground again.
Right.
With the Jews, look, excuse me, Doc, the Jews, the way the Jews have their commitment about remembering the Holocaust.
Right.
Okay? Because the Jews are saying, there ain't never going to be another Holocaust.
Yes.
End of discussion. There's not going to be another Holocaust. And we're all in agreement with that. It's a horrible thing. The Russians are saying, ain't never going to be another Hitler. Never going to be another Nazi army next to us. And
That's a good comparison.
If they goose step, we're going to take them down. Okay? So they're looking across the border at the Ukrainians wearing Nazi uniforms. And they're saying the West is supplying weapons to these Nazis. Well, the last time the Nazis were here, tens of millions of Russians died. We ain't going to let it happen again. We're going to crush them. We're going to exterminate them. You got to think the way they're thinking. And they're seeing a revival of Nazism. And it is a revival of Nazism. And America and the European Union is supporting the Nazis.
We're on the Nazi side this time.
We are the Nazis. Not we. It's not,
Yes.
Doc, we are the Nazis. What do you think Homeland Security is?
What, our version of the SS?
What is the FBI? What's the CIA? What have we become?
The intelligence state.
Yes. We are a Nazified country. Do we practice eugenics?
We do.
Euthanasia?
Abortion.
Euthanasia?
We do. Through vaccines.
Abortion? Okay. Do we do experiments on living people?
We have, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And we probably are at the moment.
We are the modern Nazis. And we became this way because the CIA, the OSS brought tens of thousands of German Nazis to America after World War II, and we learned their ways, and then we became the Nazis.
You know, one other thing about the Russians too, Rick, is that, you know, the modern thinking here in the West is we defeated the Soviet Union. We took down the Soviet Union, and it became Russia. We, the West, with our military power, we outspent them. No, a prayer meeting in East Germany brought the wall down.
That's right.
Not money, not missiles, not anything else, but the power of God. A prayer meeting that lasted decades brought the wall down.
That's right.
And so the only one to defeat the Russians in the past has been God. God, just God alone has defeated the Nazis. You may not like their version of orthodoxy, but their version of orthodoxy didn't exist 40 years ago. It was outlawed. It didn't. Where did you go to church in communist Russia? And yet, prayer, the power of God, brought communism down and raised the church up in Russia.
But the people who made Russia communist were not Russians.
That's true.
They were Bolshevik Jews who were sent to Russia by the West to overthrow Russia.
And financed.
And financed
by the Federal Reserve.
Yes. The New York Federal Reserve financed the Bolshevik Revolution, and that is...
I've got that book on my shelf.
That is a fact. You can read about it. The next one, Boris Johnson adds pressure to Germany to send those tanks. I'm waiting for him to have a tankathon on TV.
You know, a whole bunch of tanks just racing down the
No, really,
the
get all
frontier.
these warmongers on a 24-hour tankathon. Folks, keep calling. We got to get those tanks. We got to get enough tanks over to Ukraine. Just keep calling.
We're up to 820 tanks right now.
We got Latvia on the phone right now. Latvia's pledged 1 tank. We need more people calling, more countries. All you warmongers out there, you call this number right now and you pledge your tanks, and we're going to invade Russia. So this is a video of Boris Johnson. He went to Ukraine.
This is his 7th visit to Ukraine since the war began.
He's
been
not
there
as a
7
prime
times.
minister anymore.
Right.
What is his role?
I guess he's their ambassador of war right now. So this is from the Telegraph. Let's watch this.
Good to see you, Boris.
It is amazing to see you.
Welcome.
How are you? Very, very good. Very, very good. Great to see you. It's an absolute honor to be here again.
Honor for us.
You're too kind and you're too generous to time on a Sunday. Nice to see you again.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you again. Nice to see you. Oh my God, you're all here. I can't believe it. How are you? Nice. Thank you very, very much.
I don't know what his purpose is other than to maybe deliver secret messages to Zelensky. You wouldn't know there was a war going on. You don't see any bombed out windows or debris in the streets or streets cordoned off or anything like that, or people suffering or anything along that line. I know there's a war going on, but you wouldn't think there was with that managed video there, would you?
You know, Doc, Boris Johnson, I have a book in my library. It's a novel. And it was written about 40, 50 years ago. And the plot of the novel is someday there's a man-made virus. And the only way to stop this man-made plague is a super vaccine, and the whole world must be vaccinated. That's the novel.
So it sounds a lot like what happened with COVID here over the past couple of years.
Do you want to know who wrote the novel?
Well, I happen to know, but you got to tell them. They won't believe it.
Boris Johnson's father. That's the truth. I've got the book in my office.
Stanley Johnson.
Stanley Johnson. How did he know that?
The name of the book was simply The Virus. That's it. That's all you had to say.
The Virus, written by Stanley Johnson, Boris Johnson's father. He knew that there was going to be a man-made virus someday and a super vaccine that would have to be given to the whole world. And they called me a conspiracy theorist. What else do we? Oh, France. France is calling in the Tankathon too. They're going to pledge. What are these, Leclercs?
Yes.
Leclercs.
Named after a former French general there.
Okay, so we got Emmanuel Macron on the phone, and he's pledging, 10 Leclercs right now?
So France does not rule out the possibility of sending Leclerc tanks to Ukraine, French President Emmanuel Macron said during a joint press conference with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz in Paris on Sunday. They're putting the pressure on Germany right now to release their tanks as well. Macron said that sending tanks must not escalate the situation, but take into account the time to train Ukrainians to be effective and must not endanger France's own security. Regarding the Leclercs, I asked the Army Minister to work on it, but nothing has been ruled out, Macron said, adding that the move would have to be coordinated with allies such as Germany in the coming days and weeks. And regarding the Leclercs, I asked the Army Minister to work on it. Nothing's been ruled out. And of course, it has to coordinate with Germany. And that's the key factor right now, is that Germany has been reluctant to release their Leopard tanks, which are supposed to be the most effective tanks in Europe. Plus, they're withholding, giving permission to other countries that have Leopard tanks to use them or ship them to Ukraine. It's like they have veto power over whether those tanks can be shipped to Ukraine or not.
You think Mr. Scholz is going through his photo album of Berlin, 1944?
Or maybe his family photo album of all his dead descendants.
This is going to be the end of Germany. German cities are going to be incinerated by the Russians. I mean, Paris is going to be gone. London's going to disappear. So the Telegraph in London said that Jake Sullivan read the Riot Act to Mr. Scholz because of his refusal to send those Leopard tanks to Ukraine.
So we've come full circle here from the beginning of the guidecast today to this. The American officials read the Riot Act to Germany after Chancellor Olaf Scholz's refusal to send Leopard tanks to Ukraine, it's been reported. The reports of a furious dressing down came as Poland suggested it, and other NATO allies may organize their own tank alliance without Berlin in response to their shock refusal. Germany has said it will only allow the export of Leopards if the U.S. also supplies its own Abrams tanks to Ukraine.
Okay, right there. That's why Congressman McCaul said on ABC News yesterday, just one tank. That's all we need.
Just one
tank.
Abrams. It doesn't matter if it gets stuck in the mud
Yes.
or gets only 3 gallons to the mile. Just one Abrams tank. That's
Because
all we
what
need.
he's saying is, Olaf in Germany has said, we're not sending any tanks until America sends a tank. So McCaul's saying, well, we're going to send one.
All right, so this is where they're at on this. Mr. Austin reportedly argued in vain that deploying the U.S. tank would be unnecessarily difficult and time-consuming when there are hundreds of Leopard 2s already in Europe. Later, Jake Sullivan, so obviously he was talking to Lloyd Austin first. Later, Jake Sullivan, President Joe Biden's national security advisor, former head of the Penn Biden Institute, read the Riot Act to Jens Plantner, Mr. Schultz's foreign policy advisor, the paper noted.
So Sullivan, what is he, 40 years old?
No, I think he's got to be in his 50s. His stepdad was Robert Maxwell's attorney, so.
Robert Maxwell? Mm-hmm. Ghislaine Maxwell's father?
Yes.
His stepfather?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I didn't know that
This
one,
is a
Doc.
great day. This is a great day, folks. I knew something Rick didn't know.
That's true. I did not know
Yeah,
that.
that's true.
Well,
Yeah.
what a small world.
What a small world.
Can you imagine if they knew each other? That's kind of like Attorney General Barr. His father was a school teacher.
At the same
At
school?
the same school. Jeffrey Epstein was a teacher. Well, he was the principal.
Yes.
Barr's father was the principal, the headmaster of the school where Jeffrey Epstein was a teacher.
You mean his dad who wrote science fiction erotica?
Yes, and I have
Okay.
that copy of that book too, just to prove that Barr's father wrote the book. When I hear this stuff, I try to track these things down just to, it's like, Prince Philip, the Queen's husband. When I learned years ago that he wrote a foreword to a children's book saying that when he dies, he would like to come back as a virus and kill 90% of the world. Well, all right, I got to find a copy of that book, and I did. And he really did write it. And they put it in a children's book. The Rantings of an Insane Man. Who would put that in a children's book? Hey, Grandpa wants to come back as a virus and kill everybody. These people really are demoniacs. Why do we show them any respect at all? They're demoniacs.
We assume they have power, and they do have earthly power.
Well, they do have power.
I mean, they have earthly power.
The kingdoms of this world belong to them. They have it.
That's right.
They work for their father, Lucifer.
But greater is he that is in us than he that is in the world.
Okay, DW, Germany will not keep Poland from sending tanks. Okay, Poland, we're not going to file a complaint if you send the tanks over to Ukraine. So Germany's trying to get the pressure off them. Next one is from RT. This came out today. The Russians are claiming that the U.S. is storing weapons. Well, they're saying that, let me rephrase this, that the Ukrainian army is storing Western weapons inside nuclear power plants.
I can believe that. We know that they've been storing them in hospitals and schools and malls. Ukrainian forces are storing Western-supplied missiles and artillery shells in nuclear power plants, Russian Foreign Intelligence Service Director Sergei Naryshkin said on Monday. He claimed that Kiev has been using the plants as cover for ammunition stockpiles. He said, quote, "There's credible information that the Ukrainian troops are stockpiling the Western-supplied weapons and ammunition on the territory of nuclear power plants," Naryshkin said, according to a statement on the Intelligence Service's website. He added that the armaments include rockets for U.S.-made HIMARS launchers and missiles used by foreign air defense systems, as well as large-caliber artillery shells. According to Naryshkin, several cars loaded with lethal cargo were delivered by rail to the Rovno nuclear power plant in western Ukraine during the last week of December. They rely on the calculation, and listen to this, on the calculation that the Russian armed forces would not strike nuclear power plants because they realize the danger of a nuclear disaster, the intelligence chief said. But they notice how he words that, Rick. They rely on the calculation that the Russians wouldn't do it. What I think the hidden message is there, don't count us out. We might just blow it up. We might just do it. You want to store your missiles there? Okay, then it's going to be on you. Yeah. So anyway, we have this from RT, a brief video explaining the situation.
Of the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, they received reliable data that the Ukrainian armed forces are storing weapons and ammunition provided by the West on the territories of nuclear power plants in Ukraine. Now, the head of the service, Sergei Narishkin, claims that the weapons in question are some of the most expensive that Ukraine received from NATO countries. Now, the statement also mentions missiles for multiple launch rocket systems from the United States called HIMARS, various foreign air defense systems, as well as large caliber artillery ammunition. Now, the warning issued by Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service clearly states that the forces of the Kiev regime are employing terrorist tactics in using civilians.
Doc, over the weekend, a photograph appeared on social media of a missile defense system sitting on the roof of the Russian headquarters of the military in
Ministry
Moscow.
of Defense.
Ministry of Defense. Their Pentagon.
Right.
And so there you see inside the circle is the missile defense. It's a Panzer S-1 anti-aircraft gun missile system.
And on a number of government buildings in Moscow as well.
So the speculation, obviously, is the Russians are now anticipating that the West is going to give Ukraine missiles capable of hitting inside Moscow.
Right.
Or drones that are going to be flown across the border and escape whatever detection system Russia has and hit, the Kremlin, the Ministry of Defense, other important buildings. The Russians obviously aren't saying too much about what's going on.
Calling it a training exercise.
They did do a training exercise. So Russia stages military exercise near Moscow days after images showing air defense installation began circulating on the internet. This report from Radio Free Europe. So we'll move on to another one. This is Novosti. The Russian Foreign Ministry promises to respond to the blocking of RT France. So France is seizing the assets of RT, Russia Today television, and Russia said, you do it, we promise you there's going to be a response. All right, I don't know what they're going to do, but there'll be a reciprocal action. I want to jump down now to number 63, protest in Istanbul after a Swedish politician burns the Quran in Stockholm. So there was a big protest, and they brought the Islamic Quran out in the street and set it on fire. Well, what has been the repercussion? Well, we see it in the next one, a report from Al Jazeera. Turkey's President Erdogan warned Sweden, not so fast on your membership application. Turkey is not going to vote for you to join NATO after you allowed the Quran to be burned in Sweden. So Erdogan, I don't know what point they push him out. He's in a strategic location. He's going to block Sweden from getting in now. But why did Sweden allow the protest to take place? Was it a provocation?
Well, it was by a politician,
Yes.
a Swedish politician. Yes. I mean, it wasn't just some run-of-the-mill Joe burning a Quran in the street, but a prominent Swedish politician. And so, and I'm not defending Mr. Erdogan by any stretch of the imagination, but he has been dealing with Sweden on this particular issue now for quite a while. It's interesting, they're opposite sides of Europe here.
Yes.
The extremes of Europe.
Yes.
And so now there's been a lot of Islamic activity in Sweden, which goes against a couple thousand years of tradition there, especially Christian tradition there.
Yes.
Not that Sweden is the most Christian nation in the world anymore. But there's a clash of cultures that's taking place, especially in Sweden. But they're not going to do anything to Erdogan, because if they had, they would have done something to Erdogan already. And the reason why they won't do anything to Erdogan is we have all of our military assets sitting in Turkey.
Yes.
And we're not about to give that up. We've had that on the map for since the 60s, Rick.
The Incirlik Air Force Base in Turkey, and we don't know if the 200 hydrogen bombs are still underground. A couple of years ago, 4 or 5 years ago,
when Turkey
he literally shut down the base. Now, whether the Pentagon removed the hydrogen bombs, we don't know. That's not something they publish pictures on Twitter and say, hey, we're moving 200 hydrogen bombs this week.
But isn't it interesting how both sides deal with Erdogan with kid gloves?
Yes.
Almost as if he had nuclear weapons.
Mm-hmm.
And so, who knows? He may secretly have those weapons and have control of those weapons. No one would want to say that. No one would want to admit that. But neither side can get Erdogan to move, and Erdogan just doesn't seem to care.
He doesn't care. He's in the driver's seat, and Turkey is in a strategic location that whichever side they choose, NATO or Russia, whichever side he's on, becomes the powerful side.
That's right.
So right now he's NATO, but he's leaning towards Russia, and burning the Quran in Sweden didn't do anything to make him more favorable
to NATO.
Toward NATO, It's right now, don't cheer on any of these provocative actions, like burning the Quran in the streets. Don't do it, okay? I don't want people burning the Bible, and we shouldn't be burning the Quran, because all you're doing is you're insulting people, you're angering them, and the only thing that comes out of it, Doc, is bloodshed and violence
and long memories.
Okay, we don't want the Muslims burning the Bibles in their countries, and so you have to understand why the Muslims are upset when Westerners burn their Quran. You just got to think it through. And
yes, you're exactly right, Rick. We've got to remember that there's a group of people out there in the world, and Rick and I have had the opportunity to travel throughout the Middle East and met so many wonderful people in Jordan and other places in the Middle East that, yes, they are Muslim. But you know what? I preached a message this past Sunday on hospitality, from Romans 12:13, talking about benevolence and hospitality, about opening up your home. And here in the U.S., that is such a foreign concept to us. Opening up your home, bring a stranger in our home? But in you and I, as we've traveled, what was one thing that was so common with people?
We were invited to go to people's homes and have dinner with
just
them.
about every night. Come with me, my friend. Grab your arm. Come with me, my friend, my dear friend. Come with me. And we're worlds apart when it comes to theology, but he was showing hospitality that was a foreign concept to Christians.
That's right.
I'm not endorsing Muhammad for Savior, okay? What I'm simply saying is that we have a better opportunity to win the Muslim heart by showing love and responding to them with love than we do in burning the Quran.
That's right. I wouldn't burn the Talmud. I wouldn't burn any religious book. You're not accomplishing anything by burning them and angering people and provoking them. I think these actions, I think
they're provocations.
They're planned, they're deliberate. It is for the purpose of creating anger and violence. A couple more, let's see, before one more news story about war, okay? We'll wrap it up with this one. NBC News, the United States and Israel launch a massive joint military exercise to send a message to Iran.
Didn't they just finish up a massive military exercise not too long ago?
Yeah, they did another one.
So the U.S. and Israel began a massive joint military exercise in Israel on Monday to show adversaries like Iran that Washington is not too distracted by the war in Ukraine and the threat from China to mobilize a large military force, a senior official said. This is being called Juniper Oak 23. It's the most significant exercise between the U.S. and Israel to date. The biggest one, Rick, citing the enormous number of aircraft, extensive coordination with Israel Defense Forces, and live fire, Rick, a complicated live fire component. Over 6,400 U.S. personnel have joined 1,100 Israeli personnel for the exercise, which will employ 142 total aircraft. Of them, 100 aircraft are from the U.S. military, including 4 B-52 bombers, 4 F-35 fighter jets, 45 F-A-18 Hornet fighters, and 2 MQ-9 Reaper drones. 6 U.S. ships, including a carrier strike group, and 6 Israeli ships will also participate. So don't worry, Iran, if just because we have a war going that we're funding over here in Ukraine, and we've got activity going on with China, we still got room on our plate for you too.
Unless they all go off at the same time.
At the same time.
Russia, Iran, China, North Korea. Can the U.S. win all 4 of those wars simultaneously?
And think about this, the world order changes overnight because there will be nations that will align with that alliance all over the world. Africa, Middle East, South America. I mean, suddenly the world changes drastically. So,
well, we've given you plenty of information that you're not going to receive anyplace else. TruNews, we are the only news source, at least here in America, that is reporting on World War III every single day that we're here on the air. There's just a blackout. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. We're on the verge of a nuclear war and nobody's talking about it. So the fact that you're tuning in, I believe the Holy Spirit is bringing you here to hear this information so that you're not in the dark. You're not clueless about what is taking place. Most of you who are watching, you're saved. Your name is in the book of life. There's a lot of you who've yet to make that decision. And time is running out. God has brought you here to hear this news. I'm not trying to frighten people. I'm trying to alert people how dangerous the times are that we're living in right now. And that we could all disappear. Every one of us could disappear at any moment right now. We're living on borrowed time. We're existing by the grace of God every single day. And I'm going to continue every day to pray for peace, even when it looks like the madmen are in control. And yet they still have yet to take it to the limit and create that war. It's Satan who wants that war. Satan wants death and destruction. He comes to kill, steal, and destroy. He wants 1 billion people to die in their sin, lost, unable to get to Jesus Christ, to be born again. That's what he's after. He just wants to take souls to hell. And that's why we can't let him have his way in this war. If we're at the end of time, then these horrible things are going to take place. And no amount of prayer is going to stop it if it's a fulfillment of prophecy. Either way, you and I have to be ready for it.
Amen.
You have to be ready for it. And I'm talking spiritually. You have to be ready for it spiritually. Are you ready to disappear tonight? If you left this world tonight, if we all left this world tonight, are you spiritually ready? Are you at peace with God? Are you reconciled with your Maker? To live in a state of perpetual reconciliation with your Maker, it is so peaceful, so comforting to every hour of the day to know that you're at peace with your Maker, that there's no conflict. You've been reconciled to your Heavenly Father, and there's nothing between you and Him that's causing Him grief. It is a wonderful source of peace and comfort. That's where we need to be at this hour. Every one of us need to have that type of assurance that all is well between you and your Maker. That's it for today. Please tell people about True News. We'll be back here tomorrow, God willing. See you.
God bless you.